That video you were just watching talked a lot about this idea of populism. Populism, there's a lot of different definitions of this. I think the definition that was used in that video is sort of this idea that the elite are corrupt and the will of the people must dominate. It's sort of, again, this idea that the elitist model, if it is the case, sucks. It needs to be a pluralist model where the people are represented. But it's also that kind of hyper pluralist, where essentially when I'm a populist and I say the people, what I mean is this group of people that I'm in. There is a danger of this. There's good things about populism, but there's a danger of populism. It could also sort of drift toward I don't quite call it totalitarianism, but that's the idea, is that our group represents the people. So anybody who doesn't agree with us, they're not really the people. And that has this drift to it. Now, again, I do not want to say that the populism that was sort of driven by the Trump election was totalitarian, because I could make the same argument about what happened in 2008 with the people who were supporting Obama and the populism that was there. I just want to point out that there is this danger that always has to be looked out for and watched for. So the question then becomes, which is the better model? The pluralist model is not a perfect model. Whether it is or should be the case, it's still not a perfect model. It sounds good to our sort of, our modern sensibilities, where we like equality and we like everybody to have a voice and representation. That doesn't mean it's the better model or about how things should be or are. So this is a question that I don't really want to answer for you, but I do want you to think about which model you think is a better representation of what we mean when we say democracy. Let me just throw out a couple comparisons here, just to talk about, just to wrap this up. One is, what's the role of interest groups? Interest groups intermediate between members and the state. So members of these groups and the state. Remember, we talked about that. Representation is turning member preferences into policy claims. So that's kind of what an interest group does, right? An interest group says, my people want this thing right here. And so I can go sit around the table and sort of represent that. Control is another element that goes into this, where an interest group's job is to influence the policy preference of members. So this goes the other direction. So again, this is from, let me try, I don't think I'm saying this exactly right. This is, when we talk about representation, this is how the people get what they want to say to the government, okay? When we talk about control, if I'm a member of this group, then this group is help setting what I prefer. So I don't want to say the government, but we could say group to the people. So here we have this idea of which of these two, and we talk about the role of an interest group. For a pluralist, clearly the role of the interest group is largely centers on representation, turning the people's preferences into policy. From the elitist model, though, interest groups play a big role in terms of helping shape what the people should want. I know that sounds really weird, but interest groups, they play a role in both of those things. All right, let's leave that alone for now. Let's look at one more comparison. This is the question about which is the most democratic, and what does that even mean? So let's talk about elitism and democracy. So for the elitist, professional politicians and elites have access instead of citizens. Have access to policymaking, government, things like that. Is that democracy? The elitist, it doesn't feel very liberal because the groups are essentially indoctrinating the members. Great. In fact, if I focus on these two elements of it, elitism does not feel very democratic. It's essentially shaping the citizens rather than letting the citizens shape policy. And citizens don't really have access to what's going on. Okay, that's great. The question is, and that's an easy one. If I said, tell me why elitism doesn't feel very democratic, that'd be an easy one. The harder one is, isn't pluralism a little undemocratic too? Who wins in the group competitions over policy? So in pure pluralism, ideally, it's the best ideas. We sit around, we have this conversation with each other, and the best ideas are going to emerge from the competition, right? Like you would hope that's true, like in a classroom setting. Like, let's sit around and talk about something. What do you think's a good idea? And ideally, we would all sit there, we put our ideas into the middle, we'd talk about it, we'd debate it, and then hopefully the compromise would be sort of taking all the best stuff. However, as that video that we just saw showed, and some other things we talked about, there are so many groups that really what ends up happening is the loudest and the richest get heard. So again, think about a classroom. Not everybody is comfortable speaking up. So the people who are the loudest in the classroom do tend to get their voices heard way more than the people who are quiet. That's going to be true for a pluralist system as well. The loudest groups get heard. And part of what it means to be loud is to have the money to project your voice, I guess you could say. And so what the argument for this goes is that this leads to the reproduction of inequality. Essentially, the richest are going to make sure that their policies get heard, which the policy that gets passed is going to protect the richest, and on and on and on. It's going to reproduce inequality over and over again. That's going to be the complaint about the pluralist idea. Now, here's the thing. I don't want to go too far into the weeds on this, but what do we mean when we say democracy? We just spent basically 2 days really talking about democracy here. And I know you guys, I think all of you guys, have basically grown up in a democracy. You know the word democracy. I'm just wondering what you think. When you say democracy, how do you know what you mean? Or what's a good democracy and what's a not great democracy? You're going to watch a video. We're not going to come back to this. That's going to be it for this week. But you're going to watch one more quick video here, and just it's going to ask the question, does democracy work? And I just want you to be thinking while you watch that video, what does the word work mean? When you say democracy works or doesn't work, what do you mean? And so that's it. And other than that, I hope you guys had a great first week with this. I know there's some awkwardness in the whole thing, but if there's anything I can do to make this work better for you, please let me know, and we'll try to make week 2 through 6 a lot better. Other than that, thanks for the week. See ya.